today is almost all about the ball. When it comes right down to it, baseball is all about the baseball itself. There's some problems right now. There's some inconsistencies. So I got the leading expert, Dr. Meredith Wills, to talk about it. We're going to go over some quick injuries, and then we're going to get to find out why can't the baseball just be the baseball? This is injury territory. Hey, I'm Will Carroll, and as I said, we've got a big kind of technical interview with Dr. Meredith Wills, but let's go over a couple of the big injuries and go through them fairly quick. The first one that came up on Sunday was Jacob Mizorowski. This isn't an injury, and let's be very, very clear about that. Jacob Mizorowski does not have an injury. It does tell us some things about what the Brewers are doing to make sure that it doesn't become an injury. Pat Murphy came out and said he's not going to be starting. He did not hit his recovery milestones. I don't know how many times we've heard somebody, especially Murph, talking about recovery milestones, but they're watching these closely as they should be. Things like strength returning, things like his ability and flexibility, measurements, sleep. Did he go through all that? Did all the strength return? Uh, you know, Basically, did he recharge his battery enough? With the All-Star break coming up, he was not going to pitch in that. That had been pre-planned. They just said, you know what, he's not going to go. They ended up losing the game, of course. Not sure whether Pittsburgh would have hit as well off Mizorowski. You have to think no. But this is just them being very cautious. This is the best kind of precaution. And again, no injury, just not recovered. They're going to take a little extra rest. This is an opportunity for a lot of teams to do this. Speaking of, another one that did just this is Cam Schlittler. He's saying he will not pitch during the All Star game, even though he was selected. It would be his throw day. Most of the time, these guys are going an inning, but they want to go out there. They don't want to do a throw day. They want to go out there and show off what they can do. These guys have egos. They want to compete, even when it's an exhibition. So Schlittler, best part of Valor, steps away. Says, you know what? Not going to pitch. I'm going to go. I'm going to enjoy it. He's going to get his bonus, assuming he has one. He'll still be counted an all-star if you look at his baseball reference years from now, but will not pitch. Again, this is a choice. I'm sure the Yankees were involved in this. They've got a long way to go in this season. Schlittler hasn't gone this deep before, so smart decision, I think. Another pitcher, sort of half his job, Shohei Ohtani. He took the weekend off. He will not be participating in the All Star game as well. He had his knee drained, and he's had this pseudo mysterious knee injury for a while. There were people saying it was a return of his bifurcated patella kneecap, and that's not the case. What we think this is simple swelling, something going on with the cartilage, perhaps meniscus. They've been maintaining this for a while, and at some point they'll have to do something. And the hope is that's after the season. He's obviously playing very well. They've been resting him more. That's partially due to this knee and how they manage it, but partially just they want to keep him fresher. Just like with Mizorowski, I'm sure they're watching recovery markers. I'm sure they're doing lots of testing, lots of watching, lots of hands on, and we'll see where that goes. But so far, this is just a maintenance issue. The drainage, watch for that again. It's going to come back. The question is, how quickly is it going to come back? How quickly are they going to have to do this again? So if you hear it late August, they're draining it. Okay, that's fine. Probably not the best timing because if it's once a month, you don't want to be draining this thing every week, every 2 weeks. If it's monthly, every 6 weeks, the last thing you want to do is have to have him sit out because you do need a couple days afterwards to let the knee calm down. Even it's not a hard procedure. You just take a needle in, you pull the fluid out. Simple as that. It's like getting a shot in reverse. It's like getting a blood draw, except in the joint space. So you want to let the joint calm back down, especially a knee as valuable as Shohei Ohtani's. Some good news for the Dodgers. They got Edwin Diaz back on a mound. He was looked good in a rehab start on Saturday. He's going to do a couple more. Uh, he should be back very quickly. Some are saying right after the All-Star break. I don't think it's going to be that quick. Just a matter of the games, how much work he's going to get in. They're not going to have to throw him right back into the closer role if they don't want to. Their bullpen has been solid without him. Uh, that's obviously where they want him, why they're paying him the big money. But all looks good with that elbow. Remember, he had the bone chips. He did not have the nano needle. He had the standard arthroscopic. Uh, the one who did have the nano needle, Blake Snell, he's starting to gear things up. We're going to see him heading out on a rehab assignment. Probably already. Here's the thing to know about Blake Snell. Remember, he did have the nano needle. So the reason he's not back already is because they had to put him on the 60-day. It's a roster thing. I forget which move it was, but it was simply they needed the roster space. They were like, yeah, Snell, you're going to have to wait. So they held him back in his rehab, let him do things slower just because, hey, you got to wait the 60 days. Um, this isn't going to throw people off. They're going to say, see, Nano Needle didn't get him back. He's ready. It's just they didn't gear him up. So expect him to go out on a rehab assignment as soon as this weekend. And then he'll probably need 2, maybe 3 starts. I don't think they'll be too aggressive with him because they can be so conservative with him. The question is, where does he slot in? Do they start piggybacking people? Do they start rotating people out? I heard somebody mention a 7-man rotation. I can't imagine that. I can. I mean, it would be a 1 per day, and off days you just rotate it back. It could be done, uh, but there's just no good reason to do it. Uh, we'll see how it goes. It always seems they have somebody out. If they're ever at a point, especially with Glasnow coming back, yeah, will they ever have 7, 8? It's possible, but at that point, you start thinking, we do different things. We put some of these guys in the bullpen. We start figuring out what roles they would do when it comes to the playoffs. Last one I want to talk about, Jacob deGrom, strained glute. So he did not start on Sunday. He's going to be evaluated. Obviously, with the All-Star break, they don't have to make a decision quickly. They can wait and see how he responds, get some treatment going. You're going to get some butt rubs. So it's one of those situations where they because of the timing, they can watch this. They don't have to put him immediately on the 15-day. Wouldn't surprise me if they do. Wouldn't surprise me if we see this by Tuesday, just because of the way you still only get the 3-day retro. So they could take this back to Saturday. Um, so with DeGrom, they're probably going to be a little bit cautious coming out. So wouldn't surprise me to see this glute strain lead to an IL stint. So that's the injuries. I, of course, cover all of them over at undertheknife.substack.com. I'll have more details there, so you can always check that out. It is a subscription-based site. This, however, is an ad-based site. So let's get to that. And on the other side, we're going to be talking to Dr. Meredith Wills about the baseball.
It's summertime. You know what we do at FT? We look for hacks. How can we feel like we can do it all outside with something that's breathable, something that feels premium? Fabletics hooks us up. I've got the Cloud Jersey tee. It is super soft, Kratz, but it works at the gym. It works when I'm on the show. It works when I'm going to meetings. It is the true super utility player.
Same here. Difference is I got the nice stripe across so you can have style and also have versatility, because you know what? I'm going to go to the gym probably in the same stuff that I'm going to have my meetings in, and the same stuff that I'm going to go out and have breakfast in. So you know what? This is where Fabletics got me.
And Kratz, everyone can shop now at fabletics.com/Val to get 70 to 80% off everything when you sign up as a new VIP. Take a quick style quiz and be sure to select Val when prompted to unlock this offer. This is a limited time offer, so don't wait. Again, that's fabletics.com/FOUL for 70 to 80% off everything as a new VIP.
Welcome back to Injury Territory. I'm Will Carroll, and we're about to see my conversation with Dr. Meredith Wills. Now, if you don't know Dr. Wills, she's been doing a lot of work on the baseball. She is an astrophysicist by trade. She now works for SMT, one of the leading data companies in sports. They do all sorts of tracking. They did Pitch FX back before it became Hawkeye. She's got a unique skill set. Astrophysicist, expert knitter. All those things came together. And in 2019, she started looking at baseballs and realized they were inconsistent. We were seeing multiple baseballs, and we've had that same problem. Suddenly, there's a splotchy ball that Sarah's pointed out a couple weeks ago on Foul Territory. You can check that clip out. I'll put a link to it in the description. Uh, but there's all sorts of balls, and it looks like we have at least two different baseballs this year, and that's fundamentally problematic. Baseball, remember, owns 20% of Rawlings, perhaps more. They share that with Seidler Equity. Seidler, of course, the former owners, current owners, it has been fully approved, but Peter Seidler passed away, sadly. They owned the Padres. So basically, the Padres and Major League Baseball owned the place that makes the balls, which, you get all sorts of conspiracy theories. That's why I wanted to get Dr. Wills on. She has the science. This does get pretty technical, and it's pretty long. So let's get to it. This is Dr. Meredith Wills. Yep, this is a story that goes back years, and obviously you've been a big part of this. How did you go from astrophysicist to baseball expert?
Man, where do I start? I mean, one of the things is if you had told me back during the 2017 home run surge that I would still be talking about this, like, year 10, this is insane. There was never supposed to be anything more than 2017. But as far as the astrophysics to baseball connection, uh, it's a great question. It's actually kind of backwards though, because how would I put this? My dad grew up a Milwaukee Braves fan and was a fan of the Braves for its entire existence. So I was born on opening day, 1974, already an auspicious day for my dad as far as he was concerned. It was also the day that Hank Aaron tied Babe Ruth's home run record. So auspicious baseball day, regardless, and it specifically was the Braves, which was the team that my dad had grown up being a fan of. He was absolutely convinced that I was supposed to do something important in baseball. He went out, he bought me a baseball bat the day I was born, which I still own. It's insanely heavy, 1974. It's nuts. And so I've since like astrophysics, I started in college, but baseball literally since day one. I've since discovered, I mean, many, many years later, that that was also the first day that MLB switched from the horsehide ball to the cowhide ball. So it was even auspicious physical baseball construction day, probably the last major construction change that they had for the baseball. So,
There's another
I'm here
thing,
for all
and
of
I know this. We go way back.
it.
Um,
Yep.
you're a knitter, and that
Yes.
knowledge of the yarn, it was important. So talk a little bit about
hmm
that. But also, you've got a ball there. Can you tell us how the ball is actually constructed? Because that'll give us a base for the rest of the things we're going to talk about.
Yep. Naturally, my cutouts are in the other room. But so the way the baseball is constructed is I always have a baseball. Um, I'm assuming this is also audio or is it just video? Just out of
Yeah.
curiosity. Okay, so if you see what a baseball looks like on you've got your outer leather covers, and then there are the red laces, which are cotton, and that is actually part of what's important. Then when you get inside the baseball, there are several layers of wound yarn. So you've got the very interior has it's called a pill is the technical term. Sometimes people call it the core. Pill makes it a little easier to differentiate, and that is made of two layers of rubber and then cork on the inside. It's called a cushioned cork center, and it's been around forever, or at least, I mean, like more than 100 years or close to 100 years. Then around that, you have three layers of wool yarn, and the yarn it's literally, there's a wine, excuse me, there's a distributor, I guess, in Rhode Island. So it's like in the same way the leather comes from a particular set of cows in the US, the yarn also comes from a particular supplier in Rhode Island. And so there's these three layers of yarn that are uh, varying thicknesses. There's thickest wool yarn, and then you get to successively thinner yarn. And then on the very outside of that, there is a layer of like basically cotton sewing thread. and that's to make sure that the surface of the ball ultimately becomes round. Because you have if you like just wind a ball of yarn, it'll always be a little knobbly, and so that cotton thread layer evens it out. You then have glue that'll dampen the covers. You put the covers on, and then you lace it by hand. And there is, as yet, no way to economically like have a machine to lace a baseball. It's just no good economic way to do it. So that's why you still have human beings doing it. And so like any baseball you buy anywhere, doesn't matter, like if it's Little League, doesn't matter if it's a souvenir ball, it'll always have been laced by a human being. So.
Interesting. Okay, so let's talk about those laces real quick because they're one
Hmm.
of the variants here, and that's really what we're
Hmm.
talking about is the variation in the ball. Now, this
Hmm.
goes way back. There was, I
Hmm.
guess, God, I guess it would have been the mid '90s. Nike was trying to get into baseball, and they invented a baseball, and pitchers
Hmm.
loved them because the laces were like
Hmm.
an inch and a half high. It felt like they were
Hmm.
massive, and we could spin those suckers like crazy.
Hmm.
But the hitters absolutely hated them, and they never
Hmm.
caught on for some reason. Um,
Hmm.
but the laces and the drag are obviously a big deal. Obviously, because they're handmade,
Hmm.
it's just like anything else. There's going to be some variation. One person is going to do it a little tighter than another person, even if they're going to a standard. Is it
Hmm.
that handmade part that makes that nearly impossible to standardize?
Well, first of all, with the laces and the lace thickness, that's actually something that it's a standard confusion, which is that the thickness of the laces, the red cotton laces, contributes very, very little to what you're describing as the height of the seams. And the seams themselves are primarily the prominence there comes as much from the leather, probably more from the leather,
Okay.
and then from the seams themselves. In fact, what I found with the first home run surge in 2017 was actually that thicker red laces were the difference between the balls that flew farther. So that the home run balls actually had thicker laces than the pre-home run surge balls. And it's not it's the kind of thing where this gets kind of back to the knitting and the material stuff. Um, the reason is because in fact they're cotton, and because of the way baseballs, except for 2019, actually have been made historically, which is that that dampening of the covers that I mentioned when you then stitch the ball shut, and it takes a week to air dry a baseball. So it's like a 10-day process, 7 of those days being that they're air drying. Cotton, if you stretch it and you let it air dry, will stay stretched. And the example that I'll use is like if you spill coffee on your t-shirt, you go into the bathroom, you scrub it out hard. There'll be a divot on your t-shirt for the rest of the day because you've stretched it and it's air drying. So that being the case, since the cotton laces are stretching, thinner laces, they're not as strong, they're going to stretch more. And the ball doesn't like know to stay round. It's the interior wool is pushing out, and it's going to push out more into the places that push back less, which, if you look at a ball, like the seams are literally a crack in the it's a crack in the leather. And so thinner laces, the ball basically is able to deform slightly more than for thicker laces. And so that's actually where that seam height comes in, is thinner laces lead to higher seams. So I know it sounds counterintuitive
Yeah.
until you think about how they're made. But as far as that variation, there is, yes, it is there. And honestly, considering the way Rawlings makes their baseballs, it's still, I'd say it's still pretty uniform. Like they do a really good job. It's the sewers are it's a very high skill. Excuse me, yeah, highly skilled skill set. Sorry, I know I'm being redundant there. But yeah, but even things like, for instance, for a given season, when I'll say a lot of this is physically taking the baseballs apart. And what I'll find is, like, for instance, certain, in fact, 2019 was one where the balls were actually slightly larger. Like, that's its own thing. 2019, they did a whole bunch of things that were slightly different. But in that case, the reason they were larger was because the covers were actually a little thicker, but they were all like that. And then, the interior is actually the thing that's the most important. And that interior wound yarn is, again, considering the process that Rawlings uses, and it's not nearly the most advanced process that I've seen with other baseball construction. It's actually been around for longer, probably, than a lot of other manufacturing. But they will, each of those yarn layers that I mentioned, there's a weight trip on the winding machines. And so when a layer gets to a certain weight, it turns itself off, and then they switch to the next yarn, switch to the next yarn. And so once you take the covers off, they're really quite uniform. So yeah, there is ball to ball variation, and in a typical year, it's they're close enough where it's not, I guess I don't worry about it. They're still all within spec, if
Right,
you want.
right. So
Hmm.
when we're talking about baseballs and we're talking about the
Hmm.
variation, the issue is not that there's a little variation, because there's going to be a little in each ball. But as you
Right.
said, Rawlings has a single supplier for the leather. They have a single supplier
Hmm.
for the wool. I'm assuming it's a single supplier for the little cork thing, the
Laces.
pill.
Oh,
Uh,
oh, for the pill, yeah. Well, they actually manufacture the pills themselves. I believe that's done at the factory.
okay,
It's an
so
injection mold process. Yeah.
and there's a single site for the Major League Baseball. They do other baseballs in other places, but the
Yep.
baseball all
Mhm.
comes from one factory in Costa Rica.
Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Costa Rica. Yeah.
So there's a great deal of control, and
Hmm.
overall they do a good job with keeping it within those rule book variations. However,
Hmm.
what you found out first in 2017 and then again in 2021 is that it the there's variant between, I don't know, is it batches? Is it just something changed uh, in between? Is it, I don't know, is it manufacturing lots? Why is there this big variation between, some balls that are, let's call it hot, they go further, they fly harder, and
Yeah.
some that are lesser so?
Yeah. I wish this did not. I'm going to go for the simplest answer, and I promise. The problem is this is not complete. One of the problems with discussing the ball, really, in fact, before the term Goldilocks ball came up in 22 for the first time, but before then, we've always thought of balls in sort of a binary way. If there's a difference, they're dead or they're juiced. And the problem is that there have been variations of, if I were to do comparisons, your juiced ball in 2017 was less juiced than the juiced ball in 2019, and what we called the dead ball after that was not as dead as the actual dead ball in 21. So the some of the comparisons back and forth can get very complicated, and I'll do my best. Um, as far as the actual changes to manufacturing, and I'm setting aside 2019 in this, because there are a bunch of things that changed, that were different than we've seen other years. Before
And
2020,
let me stop you.
yes.
2019 was the
Mhm.
year Rawlings was sold, correct?
They were sold in 2019, but the manufacturing for the baseball itself, actually, no, hang on. They were sold during the 2018, in the middle of the 2018
Okay.
season, such that the ball for 2019 was the first where MLB would have had control over part of the manufacturing process. Um, Full control in terms of like supplier things probably would not have started till the 2020 season. You have to assume, like, the lag time is very long. Like, you don't start manufacturing, or excuse me, you start manufacturing for the next year in like August or September of the previous. So, like, right now we're getting to the end of our 2026 manufacturing, and 2027 will start in like 2 months. And that's just how it's done. But yeah, the 2019 ball, again, that was not any interior change. That was, in fact, there are, I would argue, good economic reasons, or valid economic reasons, for why that ball ended up the way that it did. And so that's less about the manufacturing process than about, sort of issues that came up because of uh, i- improvements that MLB tried to implement. Once MLB did have full control over things like, the supply and the way things were calibrated at the factory for like an entire season, that's when you started to see stuff that was quite strange. And when you talk about like the batches and the batch codes, one of the things that I did as and this actually ended up affecting the 2020 season. So this manufacturing started at the changeover first started in the fall of 2019, partway through the 2020 manufacturing cycle. So we were doing 2020 manufacturing, and then partway into that is the first time that we saw MLB do a hard switch of the entire interior winding of the yarn. So when you hear about what we now call the dead ball, the one that MLB put out press releases on and stuff, um, that was a hard change on the inside. And the reason I was able to determine that hard change is because there are these batch codes. If you take off the cover of a Major League Baseball, there's a 7-character batch code that's actually very easy to decode. It's what's called a black horse code. So you take those 10 letters, B is 1, E is 0, and then you can decode it, and it can tell you the production week consecutively going back to like 1995. It's pretty cool. So what that meant was that I was able to look consecutively at how these balls are manufactured and tell that there was a hard switch from this ball it's basically equivalent to the 2018. Same, almost like if you held a 2018 and that version of a 2020, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Like anything you measured about them, they look the same. Then that hard switch in the fall of 2019 for the 2020 season, it switched to the interior that we now know as the dead ball. They made that for 4 months, and then they switched back to making that old type of ball that would have been identical to a 2018. So,
Let's talk about this, because
mhm,
obviously, to see those codes, to decode those
mhm,
codes, you take these balls apart. You cut them,
mhm.
you unwind them, you do all those things. From
I
the
do
out,
very little cutting actually. That's no, but that's important. Very little of it is cut.
you
The
basically you
only places, yeah,
unstitch them.
I
Well,
unstitched them. Yeah, and but that turned out to be a big difference because before I did that, the reason I found the lace thickness change in 2017 was because I did unlace the balls. Any other person who was looking at ball construction took a razor blade to the laces. So
razor
yeah.
blade, I would have gone bandsaw. But okay,
Oh
even
well,
with
that's different. That's
yeah,
even worse.
even with all that,
Sorry.
from the outside, the
Hmm.
balls previous to this year all pretty much look the same. You had to take them apart, and even as an
Hmm.
expert, could you tell the difference
Hmm.
between the balls? It's not like this ball was softer or this
So
ball was bigger.
visually,
Yeah.
yeah. Visually, the only year that stands out as being different is 2019. Even this year, and I mean, granted, I only have two 2026 baseballs, but every report that I'm hearing internally, um, visually, players are not able to tell me that there is more than one kind of baseball, just like looking at and handling them. Pitchers think know something is different, but something is very vague, and it sounds like every pitcher is what they're noticing isn't it's their own thing. Like there's not a consistent difference, which is in itself, I think, sort of points to the issue. But no, on from the outside, except for 2019, if you have two random baseballs, no, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart.
What was the difference in 2019?
So in 2019, the this is when I mentioned about this kind of efficiency improvement that MLB was going for. 2019 was also the first year that they used the Major League Ball in AAA. And now that's a standard. So in fact, if you go to a AAA game and you catch a baseball, it's actually just going to say Major League Baseball. They don't even print them for AAA anymore. Um, but because what that meant was that they suddenly had to make 50% more baseballs. And remember, I said that it takes a week to dry a baseball. This is also the first year MLB's coming in and making decisions. What it looks like is they decided, all right, we're making more baseballs. Let's try to speed up the drying process. This has not been confirmed, by the way, but
Let's talk about that,
anybody
because
watching
we
this,
talked about that
yes,
off air. So could you
yeah,
explain that drying
hmm
process?
yeah. So the drying process is what you have is that the lace thickness, like I said, the ball will air dry. It takes a week to air dry, and so what you have with the
When was it wet?
2019. Oh, sorry. Okay. So when you put the leather covers on, you have to dampen the leather to make it
Okay.
curve, and you dampen the leather enough so it'll curve. There's also glue underneath. which will come up about for this year as well. And then that's how you can stitch on the covers
Okay.
in so that the ball is circular. That baseball, they won't let sit and dry. And this is why like the 2017 was, the 2017 versus before that, that lace thickness was what kept the ball rounder because of that, not stretching. So for 2019, and by the way, anyone who's watching this, you can like test this yourself. It's really kind of fun to try. So take any Major League Baseball or anything that's got a leather cover, basically. Dampen the covers, throw it in. Coming out has all the properties of a 2019 baseball. What it looks like is MLB just threw these in a tumble dryer to dry them, the way you would take that T-shirt and throw it in the dryer after you had to scrub that stain out. What you get is a ball that is very, very round, very flat seams because the seams get hammered down as it's like bouncing around the dryer. And the leather really gets all of the pores in the leather that would normally hold the mud get sort of stamped, like they literally are getting crushed out. And so if you remember when players were talking about it, like the mud wouldn't stick, they're getting stuff on the mound that they're saying they're still pearls. Um, and so that's what it looks like. And if you think about it, it wasn't a great decision as far as like the game being played, but as far as a valid economic
Right.
efficiency improvement, it makes sense. I also think that's probably why we're not going to ever see anything like the 2019 again, because it was like, fortunately, they decided, okay, bad idea, let's not do this anymore. And that's
Yeah.
why they switched back to back to the previous ball in 2020.
You mentioned the mud there. This is another
Hmm.
consistent
Yep.
thing. It's mud that
Hmm.
comes from what is it, the Delaware River or something
It's
weird like that.
it's Delaware River mud.
Yeah. So
Delaware
again, a
River.
very consistent thing that the umpires
Hmm.
rub on before the game, before the series. I forget which one it is.
Actually, the umpires don't do it anymore. This is one of the things since, yeah, basically starting in 2020. And this was one of the things that kind of came up as far as like in the 2019 Home Run Committee report, and then going forward after that, over time, the whole chain of custody has really streamlined. And this, I'm sure this is also just related to MLB, first controlling production, manufacturing, then going forward. But now there is a very strict game compliance monitor process. And so you have individuals who work for MLB affiliated with teams. And there's like, I've seen the pictures, there's like these very specific, this is what the ball is supposed to look like. There's a few levels of QA where somebody muds them up and then somebody else checks. And even then, like they're not allowing balls. If it's been mudded up for one game, it's only good for that game and you can't carry it forward. Um, but yeah, they do get mudded up. It's in the official rules in sort of, again, a vague enough way. But then there's a lot of specifics that go to these game compliance monitors that come straight down from MLB. So you don't see nearly the kind of variation. There used to be much more team specific
Yeah.
variation, and that's just gone.
Okay.
So,
This is a
mhm,
fairly technical question. It used to be
mhm,
that they would mud up a dozen, 12 dozen before a game,
mhm. Yep.
um, or before a series. I can never remember which.
Mhm.
But
For a game. Okay. Yeah.
it's a lot of baseballs, and we see there's a lot
Mhm,
of foul balls, and more of them used to go out of play. But you'll see
mhm,
catchers. It scuffs a little bit, and the catcher hands it to the
mhm,
umpire. The pitcher
mhm,
doesn't like the seams on this one.
mhm,
This one doesn't feel right. They go through
mhm,
a lot of balls. Do we know,
mhm.
even if it's just a good guess, how long an actual individual baseball stays in the game on average? It's not long.
Yeah, I want to say it's like up to five, maybe five pitches,
Yeah,
tops,
it's
three to
small
five pitches,
because
something like that. Yeah.
if
Hmm.
you think
Yeah.
about it, somebody has one of those, nine foul ball
Hmm.
out. None of those are going to be the same
Hmm.
ball.
Hmm.
Less so. I don't think something bounces off the net. I don't think they throw it back into the game very often. Um, so let's get to this year's ball. We've had all these
Hmm.
inconsistencies. Let's be
Hmm.
clear about the ownership. Because you mentioned that a
Hmm.
little bit. The
Hmm.
the company we know as Rawlings is owned by two
Yes.
entities. The first is Major League Baseball, and they own somewhere
Hmm.
around 20%, though there's some question about
Hmm.
exactly what.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be non-controlling kind of silent partner sort of thing, which we know is not the case. But the other,
Non-controlling, huh?
yeah,
Yeah, I love it.
the other is Seidler Equity Partners, a hedge
Hmm.
fund out of San Diego. You probably know the name
Hmm.
from the Padres. Peter Seidler and his family, after his passing, owned the Padres and owned them when they bought Rolex.
Hmm.
Peter since passed, but Seidler Equity Partners continues to own that, even though they are in process and have a sale ready to go of the Padres.
Okay, I was
Is,
wondering about that actually. Okay, that's good to know.
is there anything? This has always been my question. Is there any evidence that the Padres have gotten more hot balls, or since they've been kind of a pitching first franchise, that they've had more dead ball? Is there any evidence that they tilted it to help themselves?
Not that I've ever seen. I've never seen fingerprints of the Padres that are any different.
And this
To
is
the
my
extent that
my
I've seen anything,
yeah.
it's MLB's decisions. Yeah.
This has always been my point, is that it does not
Hmm.
appear, and it would make sense that if there were variations that they knew about and could control, the Padres would have been the team to benefit from that either direction.
Hmm.
This
Yep.
I have always felt, and you tell
Hmm.
me your conclusion. I think this is just inconsistency, an inability to have a consistent ball rather than some grand conspiracy to make the ball hotter, deader, Goldilocksier, whatever. Am I far off on that?
Um, well, okay, as far as the conspiracy, I can't speak to that. But we are not, at least I'm leaving out 2026. Um, but starting in 2020, and certainly that Bradford Davis, actually, I suppose the first article was with Steph Apstein at Sports Illustrated, and then 21 was Bradford Davis, 22 was Bradford Davis. I'm behind, but I have the baseballs. There's just a bunch of real life stuff. Some of it was health issues for my dad, some of it was just other things.
How many
Um,
boxes of baseballs did you move?
let's see, these are kind of like the small boxes here. I think I had 24. It's about half of my baseballs. The rest are at my dad's because I was there for like about half the time I just mentioned, from like 23 to
Yeah.
25. I mean, there's probably between 1,500 and 2,000 baseballs in there, like
Wow.
between here and Wisconsin. Yeah.
Again, this will tell you Meredith just moved from one coast to nearly the other, and that's a lot of balls to carry,
My
especially in
about half
Indiana.
of my boxes were baseballs. Actually, no, more than half my boxes were baseballs and yarn.
Crazy,
Mostly it was
crazy.
baseballs and yarn.
Okay, so
So
let's
anyway.
go past
uh,
this to the
Well, do, do,
2026
do you want to
problem.
share about the lack of inconsistency? Because there is
Oh yeah,
actually
yeah.
something
Go ahead.
to the, yeah. So here's the thing. When I mentioned about like the changeover starting for the 2020 season from like that old ball, because a more live ball, but it's not the rocket ball. So to call it like the 2018 going to the dead ball that we now associate with 21. That was a hard switch over. We saw that again for the 2021 season. So they made them for 2020. People forget that like
Yeah.
they made for a whole season. We didn't know the pandemic was coming. And even though they kind of like were using up leftovers, they had these two kinds of baseballs. And each time they switched over, it was a hard switch. Similarly, that Goldilocks ball was made in between what we thought of as the dead ball. And since then, again, I have stuff I need to catch up on, but it looks like again we've seen hard switches. I'm seeing evidence that might suggest that. I'm not going to double down on it. So inconsistency is not the word. When they are making a particular type of baseball, all of those like similar to 2018's were extremely self-consistent, but very different than the dead balls, also very self-consistent, that were being used at exactly the same time.
So yeah, so it's
Um,
batch to batch, year to year
right.
consistency,
So,
even though
but
we're not.
inconsistent is the wrong word. It's a binary situation, more than one kind of ball. And so overall performance will look inconsistent, but for a particular type of ball, it is going to perform like the other ones. The dead balls all performed like the other dead balls. The live balls performed like the other live balls. They just didn't perform like each other.
So in my imagination, this factory in Costa Rica has some,
Hmm.
manager who flips a switch and says, "Okay, now we're making this ball. Tie them tight or do whatever."
Pretty much, yeah.
It's not like that, but there's probably, I don't know. Do they take a week off and redo things?
I don't know if it's a whole week. I mean, that's the thing. Like, because of these inventory codes, one of the neat things about it is they are the three things that show up in it are the month, the year, and then a consecutive three-digit production week. That's now actually, there's now like an implied one in front of it. That's so going back to 1995, we're now into like, several, it's like your 1500 or something weeks or more. Um, but because of that, it does mean that I can tell when they're taking time off. So like you can tell that like there'd be like a 2 week switchover, for instance, when they're going from one year to the next. And so I'll see, for instance, that there's maybe only 3 weeks of August data, and then there's 3 weeks of September data, and the August ones show up for the previous season, and the September ones show up for the next season. Or sometimes I'll only have like 2 weeks of 4 weeks of August, 2 weeks of September, so you can follow that. I have not, I think I might have at the beginning seen like a 1 week break the very first time they did a switch over. But it does not look like it takes much time to do a switch, which isn't that surprising because the only thing that would be changing would be the calibration on the winding machines. I do not know how many winding machines they have, but assuming someone is coming in and just literally changing some kind of that weight trip and then probably the tension, that's it. You'd also have to put up with each one of the each time when that weight trip uh, goes and the machine stops, their standard practice, not, I don't know if it's in Costa Rica, but it is like for other manufacturers over in Asia, there will be a double check where whoever is running that winding machine will then weigh the ball to make sure that it's not like ridiculously off. So whoever was running the winding machines would also have to know about the weight changes. So it wouldn't be secret, but it would be easy to do quickly,
That makes
you know.
sense. Now let's talk about
Mhm.
the 2026 ball and what we know of it. You
Yes.
obviously haven't taken apart hundreds of these yet. We don't know.
I
We
need
do.
I need more than two. And I haven't taken those apart yet because I'm not prepared to get rid of my only data until I've got a little more just in case.
We'll
So,
talk about that at the end. How
mhm,
people can help. But Enoceros was the first that I saw talking about the
mhm,
oily, splotchy baseball,
mhm.
and that was problematic in that even after mudding, players could see something on the ball, feel something on the ball in some cases. Uh, Talk about what you've seen and heard from your sources about the differences in this year's baseball. And it seems that they've gotten rid of the splotchy ball. Was that the normal batch changeover, or was that an emergency batch changeover because they had a funky ball?
Okay, so I had sources informing me of the ball, this ball with the yellow discoloration starting on opening day. Literally opening day, people were sending me pictures. Having again checked since then with uh, as far as that discoloration, what I had originally hypothesized looking at different kinds of pictures, in some cases it literally is splotches. A number of the pictures I saw, though, it was not so much splotches as almost like stripes, like
Okay.
very, very specific, which this is building up to why I don't care much for MLB's explanation. What it looked like to me based on the stripes, and again, for people who are just listening, I'm holding up the baseball again. Along the saddles, remember I mentioned the
Mm,
glue that they'll have the make the cover stay in place. Uh, they'll very often there is glue, but they'll do it again. They'll literally rub it along the saddle. And in older baseballs, I see this all the time. Sometimes it even looks like it's there's a strip that's almost like uh, that's like rectangular. It's kind of interesting. So it's not necessarily random. And I looked at that. I'm like, that looks like it's glue soaking through the leather, which I thought was outrageous, even then. And I was able to confirm with a couple, different sources, different clubs, that what they referred to was excess glue. I believe the closest I got was one source who called it something like, what was it? I don't know if he used, I don't know if he used the term oil, something like that, but it was specifically about referring to attaching the laces. So it was clearly had a glue overtone to it. Having checked with people who know about the manufacturing process, that kind of thing isn't unreasonable. It would be something that probably would be, in fact, on the glue manufacturer, such that like if the consistency was wrong and maybe they had to use more glue, that could happen. Um, so what I did find interesting was that it's the fact that it hasn't been noticed much is because once you put the mud on, it's very hard to spot the stuff. So it's not the kind of thing where every picture I've seen that has it. In some cases, I've actually been able to have people confirm this ball started out with glue on it, even though you can't tell under the mud. Um, but that's the when it's being noticed, it's almost always before the mud goes on. You don't see it when the mud
Right.
after the mud goes on.
Yeah.
It does not at all fit with it does not fit with MLB's official explanation, though.
I talked to a pitcher who said he could see it, but he
Mhm.
had to know to look for it, and it was that striping
Exactly,
that you talked about. Now, MLB
exactly.
first sent the ball
Hmm.
to UMass and said, make sure this ball's okay. And from
Hmm.
everything they're saying, it,
Hmm.
there's no real major difference in the balls. The balls had a discoloration, but they're fine. It
Hmm.
wasn't like they were
I
factory
would agree with that.
settings.
Actually, I'm reasonably certain it's mostly just cosmetic. Yeah.
So, what don't you buy about the explanation?
Well, the explanation that they talked about is something about excess oil from the yarn soaking through the covers. Having disassembled, you know, maybe 1,000 baseballs, uh, yarn in general tends not to be oily.
I was
Definitely
kidding.
not this stuff. Like I will literally after if I have to, if I have like a whole bunch of baseballs, I am unwinding at the same time. I have to put moisturizer on my hands because my hands will chap. Wool yarn, it is, there are ways, but it's
Yeah,
like you
you
have
would
to be
have to have
doing
absorbed
lanolin
it.
with a fisherman's sweater, and yeah, it's not like the yarn that's coming that they use for the baseballs is not oily. Not to
Unless
mention
something
the
oily
fact,
got on it, which would not be part of the process.
yep, but remember that cotton thread layer I mentioned?
Yeah.
You then have the cotton thread layer. So let's say we have oily yarn. That oily yarn has to then soak through a cotton thread layer. Cotton is going to wick that oil as much as it can. So it's going to like already kind of spread stuff out. You then have the glue. The oil is going to soak through the glue up to, I mean, there's actual barriers between
Yeah.
the yarn, and so it's a strange explanation. When I first read it, and this is again kind of goes back to yeah, it's something like excess oil. Remember the source I mentioned before, excess oil used to attach the laces, or that was again this sort of weird phrasing. Um, the way that the official statement from MLB read was, it sounds more like a paraphrase of whatever memo was sent in February that was not remembered correctly. And you're like again, a game of telephone almost, and then they
Yeah.
didn't go back and check the original memo. So that's how I've been reading that, because what they described just it doesn't make sense. I mean, that being said, I haven't
Yeah.
opened one yet, so maybe I'm completely wrong. But a ball with that much oil on the inside would feel very, very different.
Yeah. The other thing that I've heard is that it doesn't feel different, it just looks different. If it were oil, you would think,
Yes.
again, the mud's going to correct most of this, but
Hmm.
it would feel
Hmm.
slick, which a pitcher wouldn't like, or it would feel
Or at
sticky.
least squishy.
Yeah.
Yeah, or squishy or sticky. Yeah.
If it were glue, I would think you would get a little bit of stick, and pitchers would freaking love that. Um,
Mhm.
we haven't had that. But now, beyond oily, let's just call it the discolored ball.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just discolored. Yeah.
so we've got a new batch of balls, essentially. And it
Mhm.
came about the same time, and understanding all the other effects, park effects, wind
Mhm.
effects, especially weather effects, but the ball
Mhm.
started flying. So, do we have another hot ball? Do we have a second baseball in Major League Baseball this year?
I don't think so, actually. And I have I'm this is where having the baseballs coming in I think will help. I do think something has happened, but I don't think this gets back to the whole, the change back and forth with the two baseballs where there was a lot of, a secretive process. This does not require a secretive process. What if okay. For context, yes, we are definitely seeing balls flying out, and we're getting overall like the average drag. If you go to the Statcast like historical drag value, that's like my favorite one of their websites. I check it all the time. I guess Baseball Savant, sorry. Um, but the average drag, yes, is lower. The thing is though that the extremes on that, the variation is like nothing we've had historically, even pre-humidor. And by the way, starting with the humidor, stuff gets a lot more consistent. Like you have to almost ignore anything that's before 22 if you're looking at how drag goes over the course of a season. So like just in May going into June, like you had one, it was like May 18th or something, and it's got a drag that's like down at 2019 levels. And then 2 weeks later, June 8th, it's up at 2025 levels, which was the highest drag here. Back down another 10 days to these 2019 levels. The scatter is nuts. And having seen a few other things, like Tom Tango actually put out a really nice thing just a few days ago where he took into account, I think this might have been weather related, but it's sort of essentially the month by month kind of changes, and then looked at historically going back through the whole StatCast era. And it ends up evening stuff out a little bit. And what you see in that is that overall, at least so far, there is, yeah, you're getting more home runs or like lower drag. Wish I remember the units on that. But not quite as outrageously as it might look for like this
Yeah.
sudden jump. However, Alan Nathan a few weeks before this had looked at the what's called the standard deviation, and that's literally just the variation from like the actual average. And what he found was that the standard deviation on the drag for 2026 is like double what it's been in previous years. I mean, it's outrageously large.
So
So what that means is that the drag, yeah, sorry,
it's a more inconsistent baseball this year rather than the bats to
much more
bats.
inconsistent. Yes, and so the inconsistency, what I sort of the hypothesis I'm running with is that if you have a single type of baseball and you loosen the quality standards coming out, then you could get a ball that's much more inconsistent. And that, you remember I talked about the economic decision from 2019? One of the things with the factory in Costa Rica, and this also speaks to, kind of the lack of advancement with the way the baseball is made in Costa Rica versus anywhere else in the world. Um, the discard rate on baseballs that do not end up going to Major League or AAA is 55%. They get rid of 55% of their baseballs. 55% are not considered good enough. So less than half of the baseballs that they make are considered good enough to be used in MLB, which is outrageous. So let's say they decide, all right, we don't want to get rid of quite this many. Let's say they only want to get rid of 40%. You'd have to change the quality control to some extent to have that many more baseballs come through. And one of the things that the size and weight variation, like the official rules, even though, for someone like the home run committee, they did not like the level of variation. It's like it's 5 to 5.25 ounces, 9 to 9.25 inches around. And that seems large, I guess, for at least for the home run committee, it did. But having looked at all the baseballs I mentioned, they fall within that. That is literally the within spec. And even the stuff that's been on the small side, that's still like, nothing is flying with the level of, the 2019s that
Right.
I mentioned were very, very different on the outside. And previous other years, like smaller wouldn't have done that. However, if you loosen the quality control standards enough, what I suspect is we're getting physically smaller baseballs. Smaller baseballs will fly farther.
Okay.
And all you need is enough of them to get out. Like it's not like the ball's over. Now it is starting to look like the drag might be down overall, like on average. It looks like it's tightening up a bit, but it's nothing like those 2019 extremes. So I do think that what we're seeing is more likely to just be lower quality standards
Okay.
that have been
Now,
imposed.
there's a couple things I have to go back and
Hmm.
address. First
Sure.
one is,
Yes.
I don't know
Hmm.
if you know this. Is Alan Nathan still the official physicist of Major League Baseball?
Not anymore. He does a lot of independent stuff, but no,
Okay, so if
his
he's
actually, in
independent,
fact, I'm much more comfortable with his research now that he's doing it independently.
exactly. And not that I'm
Yeah.
questioning Alan, love his work. The other is
Oh, no,
that
no,
Tom Tango, who you,
right.
yeah, the other
Hmm.
is Tom
Yes,
Tango
sir.
that you mentioned. Again,
Hmm.
long
Hmm.
independent statistician, but now
Hmm.
works for Major League Baseball.
Yes. In his case, what he showed though was easy to reproduce quantitatively.
Exactly.
That was
Again, not
literally taking
questioning the
drag
work,
data.
just thinking,
So not
just that
worried
you
about that.
mentioned that
Yeah.
they've got an interest in this,
Hmm.
or in Alan's
Okay.
case,
Gotcha. Yeah.
doesn't
So
have
for
an interest in
context.
this.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
the other is that going back, for those of you that haven't read The Science of Baseball, my book from a couple of years back, and that would be most of you given the sales figures, Meredith and her work on balls
Great book.
was chapter one, in fact.
I
And
was gonna say
in
I got a
that,
whole chapter. Kidding, it was my parents' favorite book ever.
and you and Keenan, chapter one and chapter two. So one of the things I learned in my research on that, which was mostly interviewing you, much like this, was that that discard rate that you mentioned, over 50%. There is an economic element to that because they don't just toss these balls into the jungle of Costa Rica. These
Hmm.
balls are ones that become either practice balls in some cases because the batting practice balls are different. Um, they're basically just, again, discards. They're like factory
Hmm.
seconds. The other,
Yep.
and this is where I think they don't care about that rate, is that they still get stamped, but I think there's some code, and then they become balls that people sign because there's an
Hmm.
entire authentication process. When Aaron Judge was going for the home run record,
Hmm.
uh, I know with Otani they use a special sort of hologram or DNA. I don't know what it does, but
Oh,
Major League
no,
Baseball.
I know how they do the invisible stuff. That I can explain that if you want.
Yeah, please do.
Sure. Okay. So if you again having a, I suppose I've got a minor league ball here, but if you uh, get a major league baseball, and again this can be less dinged up is easier, but this will show through the ones that are mudded up, and you use a black light on it, you will actually see part of the quality control is that there is a black light ink stamp that that particular QA person will put on it to sort of show it's been seen by QA. And there's sometimes you'll see more than one. You can find evidence of like it might get sent back because the laces aren't as even, and so like okay, fix this, and then it goes through a second time. But every single baseball will have that. When I remember hearing first about like an invisible thing with Aaron Judge, so that they knew for sure it was one of his and that they were numbered, the obvious thing is to take a pen or a stamp that uses the same kind of ink, and have that and that is in fact I believe what happened, and that actually happened like day of in some of those cases where someone would mark it so they knew like, and then they just would hand those to the umpire so the umpire would know which balls were which.
Yeah, I'm told
Um,
there's something
but
else inside as
mhm.
well that, but
Oh,
you had
no,
to take the thing apart.
the other thing was on the was written on the outside, but those for the judge ones they were both outside. Nothing was internal.
Okay. Um,
Yeah.
so with those and this authentication process that they have,
Mhm. Mhm.
they've got a lot of control, and yet they don't have a consistent ball. Perhaps more inconsistent this year than ever.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
they don't really have the incentive because they make way more money on the signed balls and those. So I don't think they have to do that. But nobody else has this problem. If you go to Mizuno, who does the baseball for the Japanese leagues, they don't have this consistency problem. I don't know how many of
Mhm.
those you've tested. I know baseball players actually love those because they can pre-stick them with something.
Mhm. Yeah, but
I don't know who
Mizuno's
makes the
they
Korean
do
ball, but
pre-tack for
they're
those.
very consistent.
Yeah. The Olympic balls are the best. The Olympic balls are my
Yeah.
favorite, and those are gorgeous on the inside. Oh man, yeah, Olympic balls are highest quality I've seen.
Who made those?
Uh, I want to say it's SRC or something. Does that
Hmm,
sound right?
don't know them.
It's no, it's very similar. It's not a, I mean, it's not a company that normally I believe they do like gloves and other kinds of
Hmm,
sporting equipment. They have a single factory in Sri Lanka that only makes baseballs. It's very much in the model of the Costa Rica factory, and they have the most up to date manufacturing techniques I've seen, and to the point where they are not pre-tacked, but because of the nature of the way that the leather is tanned and finished, it feels like it should be pre-tacked. There was actually some confusion about that in the Olympics last time, where some of the reporting implied that they were pre-tacked and not mudded up or something. And in fact, it was the reverse. They were mudded up with no pre-tack at all. And it was actually, but the leather is amazing. Like the grip is great. They are beautifully round. They do not get wonky. I mean, maybe after they get knocked around enough, they get wonky. But yeah, I can see why like people would love playing with them.
interesting.
And the Rawlings ones out of Costa Rica are probably the lowest quality at this point. Maybe some of the ones out of China,
Interesting.
or
Now,
some of the other Asian countries. But
one of the things you were telling me
yeah.
before we started recording was that it's not just a problem with the Major League Baseball. That there is, and again,
Mhm.
let's be clear: the Major League Baseball is used in the major leagues and AAA, and there were a lot of
Mhm.
early explanations they were doing that to get the pitchers used to the ball. That there was some difference. I think there was a different manufacturer at some point for the
Well,
minors.
yeah, the anything that's minor league, it's still Rawlings, but they're made in China. I mean, in fact, case in point, can you see on the see there's like a little
You have it just
written
a little
thing
to
there?
your move
Yeah,
a little to your
so it
left.
oh sorry, let's do it. That's upright. There we go, like
There you
that.
go.
See it?
Yep, can see that.
Okay, and it says China, and this says EHLC4. That's actually, in fact, that's that black horse code that I mentioned. So E is 0, H is 6, L is 2, C is 4. This was stamped in June 2024, and it is a minor league baseball.
So,
Um,
but there,
all the minor league baseballs are made in China.
so this
Yeah.
year that
Mhm.
there's problems you were telling me with the lower minor league. This would be Double A and below.
Yeah, double A and down. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
And yeah, for whatever reason, the home run rates are like 50% higher. They're through the roof. They're comparable. I mean, in some ways, I mean, I've got those. I have gotten a couple baseballs from this year for minor leagues, and those don't feel different on the outside. They're not like the 2019s. I mean, the 2019 ball in AAA made any kind of comparative stats year to year useless because the home run rates in AAA went up 60%. There are some leagues that are seeing those kind of numbers as well with the minor league ball. But in that case, like this one is 25. I've got some 26s. They feel the same, you know. So it's not like it's. I'm not sure, but that is probably a difference on the inside. Um,
So
so,
the thing you need more than
but it's
anything,
a different difference than you'd have from the Costa Rica factories because those are in
the thing,
China.
the thing you need more than anything else is more balls, of course. Uh,
Lots of
People out
baseballs.
there
Yep.
who catch a foul ball, who get tossed a ball, who catch a home run ball, and want to help you out. Is there a way they could
Mhm.
get those balls to you?
So yeah, they can. I was going to say I can pass on an address, or they can maybe if they want to contact you directly. That's
Yep.
probably the best way to do it. So yeah, if you contact Will, he does have an address for me that you guys can send stuff to. And really, what I need is anything at this point. If it's particularly if it's got to be a game type situation, because and with the majors, batting practice does work now, particularly because they now put mudded up balls in batting practice, and because of the types of differences I'm looking for. If you can get me a baseball, I'd ask that you write on the cover, like in pen, that's fine. But the date that you got it, the venue or like the matchup, obviously if you tell me the park and the date, I can figure it out. And then the provenance of it, like is it a game ball? Is it something you got in batting practice? And if it is batting practice, was it home or away? Because home batting practice and away batting practice often use two different baseballs. If it's from the bullpen, bullpen, and again, home or visitor. But just that information will help me. And then for minor league balls, again, same kind of thing. Those are actually even more useful though, because, or I should say, the same provenance is good, but there's no question that balls that are sent to minor leagues, they use exactly the same baseballs for game and batting practice. Like there's no practice differentiation like there sometimes will be for the majors. Although honestly, I'm not even sure what they do for the majors anymore. And I don't think that's necessarily that they are doing fewer practice balls, but that they're just not bothering to make sure the game balls are better than the practice balls to the same extent. The stamping alone, like I am astonished at how poor the stamping on Major League Baseballs will be now for game balls. The kind of things that normally you would have seen only for practice, or what the term we'd use would be scuffs. It's bizarrely bad. And this is what I mean. Like that, there's been, and a lot of it seems like cost cutting. The priorities changed when, you know, Bud Selig had very different ideas to begin with. So like you get a lot more in the way of like baseballs that had cool laces or that had, these very specific things. What that meant was that like I have baseballs from like All-Star games or World Series from, like not just from years before some of these, but in some cases they're wildly out of date. Like I have a ball that was a batting practice ball at Coors Field that is from the 1992 All-Star game.
Wow.
And it's because they got it as a BP ball because that stuff would just get like sold to the teams for practice. With kind of the current sort of Manfred commissioners, like that term with MLB, they have rolled a lot of that back. So we haven't had an all-star game ball. They used to have like cool laces and cool stamps. The last one we had for that was actually didn't even happen. It was the one in Atlanta that got changed over to Coors at the last minute because of issues with was it voting rights stuff? I
Yeah.
forget. Yeah. And there they just stamped them purple. Since then, we have never had another All-Star game ball that has cool laces, even though that was a standard annual thing. The last time we had a ball that had an opening day stamp was actually 2020. We don't get those anymore. The only time you see commemorative stamps are when the teams pay for them themselves. I don't think we even have balls that are stamped postseason or World Series anymore. They all look the same.
I've
They
heard
are.
we're going to get some sort of weird ball for America 250 in Philadelphia home run derby, but who knows? Netflix might
The
do anything for
the
that.
home run derbies still have the weird covers, but that's because T-Mobile pays for them.
Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
That was Dr. Meredith Wills, one of the leading experts on the baseball, how it's been put together, the construction of it. She takes them apart as she detailed. Great stuff from her. I've known her for years. So thank her for her time. Thank Dylan Shaw for setting everything up on the back end. We got more great guests coming. We've had such great guests on here. Edward will be back this week as think I'm over this illness. Still not back to 100%, but we'll get back to a more normal schedule, a more normal format, but we'll continue getting these great guests. I hope you're enjoying these. I know I am. So, for everybody here at the Foul Territory Network, thanks for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all those podcast things. And we'll see you next time on Injury Territory.